So this video is based on economies of scale. Now, economies of scale occurs when increased output leads to lower average costs or lower unit costs, and it's usually an advantage of a growing company. Now, this specific video is going to look at one type of economies of scale, and it's going to be looking at external economies of scale. Now, external economies of scale are business enhancing factors that occur outside a company but within the same industry. So it might have nothing to do with the business strategy, but actually just the location that it's in. So when we're having a look at the economies of scale diagram, it's always really worth remembering that when we're looking at the cost advantages, we are looking at in the long term. So we're looking at long run average costs. And we're looking at how companies, when they grow and they expand, they can take advantage of that growth and that increase in output by reducing their long run average costs. Now remember, in this video, we're not going to look at the internal strategies. We're going to look at how a company could use its location and where they're located in order to achieve those cost advantages.
So everything we've just described is internal economies of scale with regards to the diagram. But when we're looking at external economies of scale, the diagram changes. So what we're looking at with external economies of scale is cost reductions that occur as the whole industry grows in size over time. And what that does, it shifts the cost curve of the individual firm downwards, as we can start to see the diagram of that arrow. So again, what it looked like is the following. So we'd see long run average costs fall to long run average costs 2 because of that location. Now, these types of external economies of scale, they can be known as economies of agglomeration, economies of clustering, and it's to do with as the whole industry expands, then because of that expansion and because of all the benefits that comes with that location, it helps to reduce the long run average costs for all firms involved. Now, we've seen examples of this, such as, for example, Silicon Valley. But what we're going to do in the rest of this video is give you some examples of external economies of scale related to London. So we're going to look at that now.
Economies of concentration. So economies of concentration is when firms within the same industry cluster together so they can take advantage of the existing infrastructure and supply networks, and moreover skilled workers tend to shift closer to such clusters for work, thereby giving firms easy availability to highly skilled and very productive labour. Now, a prime example of this is London. Inner London, in terms of if we think about the amount of people who travel and work within London that are really highly skilled, and we think about the transport networks and the type of enterprise and infrastructure that has been set up within London. Now, this example I'm going to show you a little bit more via a BBC documentary all about, I suppose, the economies of scale of London.
This port is a 50-year bet that London continues to thrive. What's attracted this £1.5 billion investment is the market of 17 million prosperous consumers in London and the South East.
This is where the primary mix of headcount and spend has created the biggest economic zone in Europe. So to keep supply chains as tight as possible, we need to have the ships coming as close as they can to the biggest point of consumption. It's not rocket science. It was the Romans who first did this 2,000 years ago, establishing London as our national hub port.
The key word is that London is a hub, and hubs are really important. We need to unwrap that concept to understand the London formula. Now, this isn't the place to do it. It's all rather sparse around here. We have to head to the centre, because a really good starting point is to think of London as an invention for cramming the maximum number of talented people into the smallest possible area. To see that in action, you have to get up pretty early. It's 5:45 in the morning, and London is stirring. 200 miles away, Glen Britton is starting his commute, just like he does most weeks. Glen lives near Stockholm. agency in London. It's frustrating to leave his family behind, but he knows the best careers are to be found in the capital.
For me, the train journey is the most productive time of the week. It's early enough in the morning, there's no calls, very few emails, so I can really concentrate on writing something or really thinking something through.
You see, London sucks, by which I mean it's successful because it sucks in so many people like Glyn from around Britain.
The simple fact is that London flourishes on the back of the talent it attracts, the people who come here. It isn't Londoners who built this city into what it is today, it's the whole country. It's a national asset.
It does mean, of course, that London has more than its share of the most qualified people. Across the country, graduates make up 38% of the working age population. But amongst London's workers, they make up 58%. With more qualified workers than other regions, London hosts more of the top jobs.
I work as a consultant in the city.
I work in marketing for a TV company. I am a knowledge manager. I kind of like lead collaboration programs.
I have to go with the workers, so at the moment I'm working in London, I live in the Midlands, so I have to commute.
I live out in Lincolnshire. Obviously, London, we're half an hour away, and house prices are cheaper. Brilliant. Sign me up, you know.
Sucking in talented people is half the formula, but then London does something to them. It squashes them together.
Just before Edmonton Green on 4th Street, is it up by the police station there, Robert?
Each day, more than 800,000 people from outside pack into London. Most commute in from the suburbs, as there isn't room for everyone to live in the city itself. Some, like Glyn, travel from much further.
I didn't live in London for 15 years, and we came to that inevitable point of life where you want to get out of town, and we looked at the train journey up to Stockport, 2 hours. It's undoable.
Packing people in is key to what London does to Glyn and his fellow commuters. They all benefit from working in the vicinity of nearly 4.5 million other people. Just look at how the density of workers in London rises in the rush hour, the city more than anywhere else. When it comes to cramming workers in, London towers above the rest of Britain. What's interesting is how the hustle and bustle of packing workers in appears to foster productivity. London's workers produce 29% more per hour worked than the UK average. If we compare each area's productivity to that average, Cornwall comes out worst. Berkshire, Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire do well, but inner London comes out way ahead. And London overall generates more than a fifth of the country's income. Glyn and the other workers of London make up just 15% of the country's workforce. But together, they produce more than Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and the West Midlands put together.
So as you can see in the video, the amount of people who are attracted to working in London really benefits all the companies who are located in London, because when they need to recruit, they know they've got easy access to highly skilled workers who are going to be more productive, and because of their increased productivity is going to help reduce their unit costs. Now, another type of external economies of scale is economies of information. Now, economies of information is when several firms are located close to each other and they can access perfect information on the prices of inputs. Since all firms purchase inputs from the same suppliers, the latter cannot charge different prices from different firms. So the elimination of discriminatory pricing ensures that no firm pays a higher amount for inputs, and it reduces the overall average cost. So in other words, if, for example, you've got lots of retailers, and if they're getting similar supplies, because they're in such close proximity, they're probably going to have quite good relationships, even if they are competitive against one another, and they'll have more information about what the suppliers are charging and what's deemed fair, and it just allows that for that transparency. Now, another type of economies of scale, and again, I'm going to show you a video example of this, but it's economies of innovation. So, before I really delve into this, I'm just going to show you the video now.
This small piece of London is filling up with the world's best in art, in science, and in technology. It is the kind of development the rest of the country would kill for. And it raises the question, of all the counties and cities in the land, why has it arrived here? Understand what's happening in King's Cross, and you'll understand why London dominates. First stop, this vast new building. This will be the Francis Crick Institute, one of the largest scientific research centres in the world. The Nobel Prize-winning biologist Sir Paul Nurse will run it when it opens in 2015. And lesson 1 is that proximity fuels productivity. You get more from people by putting them close together.
These labs are particularly open. There's not sort of walls in between different groups.
It's the sort of science equivalent, or as close as you can make laboratories to open plan, really. Around 1,250 biomedical scientists will work in labs, clustered tightly together. And it's all meant to improve the chances of making a breakthrough.
What's good about it is that if you're working in, say, one of these laboratories and you're surrounded by other groups doing somewhat different things, you'll come across people with different expertise, different technologies, different interests, and you'll meet them in that sort of core space in the middle.
Top-level research. It's just what every region of every nation wants to be a leader in. But being in London gives the Crick scientists an advantage. Connections to the world of business.
If you're going to translate scientific discovery into useful applications, you need all sorts of skill sets. You need access to finance. You need access to legal advice. You need entrepreneurs. And that's all here in spades.
There is quite a simple principle at play here, and at work across the capital. In some industries, two people working next to each other are more than twice as productive as the same two people working further apart. Now, economists have a word for all of this. It would have to have 5 syllables. They talk about economies of agglomeration, how you copy, collaborate, and compete intensely with people nearby. London has agglomeration economies in spades, and that is just one part of its formula.
So economies of innovation is where many firms prefer to set up their premises close to centres engaged in R&D or efficient production methods. So firms can then quickly adapt to all innovations developed by these centres. And you saw just in that with regards to science and regards to the amount of scientists in close proximity to one another, carrying out lots of research and development. And that's just in the science field, but you can imagine how it takes place in the operations field as well with regards to manufacturing and so on. And they can share their expertise, they can collaborate, they can innovate, and it links to economies of concentration as well. And when you, I suppose, embed both of these, you delve into economies of agglomeration with regards to networking. Now, the final external economies of scale I'm going to look at is known as tax breaks. So with regards to tax breaks, that is when the government of a country offers tax concessions on the production of a certain product or subsidies on the purchase of certain raw materials. It reduces the cost of production of all firms in that particular industry, but again, is related to a certain location. Now, a prime example of this is the free ports that was announced in the 2021 budget. So a free port, they're usually located around shipping ports or airports, but goods that arrive into free ports from abroad are exempt from tax charges. Now, these taxes are only paid if the goods leave the free port and are moved elsewhere in the UK, and in England, companies inside the sites or in the locations will be offered temporary tax breaks. So these include reductions to the tax companies pay on their existing property and when they buy new buildings. So again, by being in that location and by being in part of that free port, you are going to have a reduction in your total costs, and therefore as you obviously increase production, you increase output, but you don't have these costs involved, you're going to obviously achieve that external economies of scale. Now we can see in the video Rishi Sunak on the far right, and what I'm going to do now is just show you his announcement on those 3 ports.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I have one final announcement that exemplifies the future economy. A policy on a scale we've never done before, a policy to bring investment, trade, and most importantly jobs right across this country. To replace the industries of the past with green, innovative, fast-growing new businesses. To encourage free trade and reinforce our position as an outward-looking trading nation open to the world. A policy we can now only pursue now that we are out of the European Union. Free ports. Free ports are special economic zones with different rules to make it easier and cheaper to do business. They're well established internationally, but we're taking a unique approach. Our free ports will have simpler planning to allow businesses to build, infrastructure funding to improve transport links, cheaper customs with favourable tariffs, VAT or duties, and lower taxes with tax breaks to encourage construction, private investment and job creation. An unprecedented economic boost across the United Kingdom. Free ports will be a truly UK-wide policy, and we will work constructively with the Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish administrations. Today, I can announce the 8 free port locations in England. East Midlands Airport, Felixstowe and Harwich, Humber, Liverpool City Region, Plymouth, Solent, Thames and Teesside.